The Honor 8X and Realme 2 Pro are splendid smartphones for the money, but how good are their cameras? This is Sandeep from RevAtlas, let's find out. The rear-facing camera on the Honor 8X is a 20MP f1.8 unit with a secondary 2MP depth sensor, while the Realme 2 Pro gets a 16MP f1.7 unit and a similar 2MP depth sensor. The images shot on the Honor 8X tend to be warmer, while it's a bit cooler on the 2 Pro. 8X images also tend to have a color cast at times, which can really affect the photos at times. Details are more abundant and shows a sharpness on the 2 Pro, contrary to what the pixel count might suggest. There seems to be some clarity applied onto a 2 Pro photos as well that adds to the feeling that sharpness and details are higher, but then again it's tastefully done. The dynamic range is also much better by default on the Realme 2 Pro, which also manages to take images with lower ISO levels thanks to the brighter f1.7 lens. You can use the HDR mode to boost the dynamic range on the 8X, and it brings it a whole lot closer to the photos shot by the Realme 2 Pro as well in HDR, but here again there is an apparent difference in terms of sharpness and detailing where the 2 Pro does much better. Coming to the portrait mode, we had posted shots taken with both the phones on social media. Phone A on top was the 8X and phone B at the bottom was 2 Pro. I personally prefer the 2 Pro photo, and so did many of you. The 8X color cast and warmth is overdone in this. The blurring and bokeh is done well on both, however the sharpness on the point and focus is much better on the 2 Pro. The exposure is a bit better handled on the 8X, but that's an easy fix for the 2 Pro in post-production. This is with the aperture mode on the 8X and portrait mode on the 2 Pro. The portrait mode on the 8X is too subtle, so the aperture mode is what we chose. It also allows you to refocus and adjust the level of the blur after taking the photo. By default, the blur is a bit stronger at f4 depth of field setting on the 8X, but you can choose to make it stronger or more lenient. One thing the 8X does better in portrait mode is that it can actually apply a blur to a larger object even from much further distance. The closest end of this boat was around 6 feet and the furthest was around 11 to 12 feet, and yet it got a nice linear blur applied, which looks better than the Realme 2 Pro if you ask me. In terms of low-light photography, the Realme 2 Pro photos are again better in terms of the sharpness and detail, and the noise levels are also kept more in check. It has a base ISO of 33 compared to the 50 on the 8X. But the color reproduction is entirely opposite to the daytime shots where the 2 Pro was better. Here the 8X has more accurate colors and holds on to color information well, while there's some spotting and banding occurring in certain regions on the 2 Pro in extremely low light situations. In most situations, the 8X is too soft under low light and the 2 Pro has a clear lead, but the 8X has a party trick up its sleeve in the form of night mode. It's not as good as the night mode on the P20 Pro for instance, since it's subjectable to shakes and object blurring since there's no OIS, but at least when it's needed you can get a more well exposed frame, albeit with higher noise levels just in case you need it. The panoramas on the Realme 2 Pro are of better quality in terms of detail, sharpness, color and overall dynamic range. The Honor 8X takes images that are roughly the same size but aren't as impressive and seem a bit washed out. The front-facing camera on both these devices have 16MP of resolution as well as f2 aperture. The front camera on the Realme 2 Pro manages to hold on to details and sharpness much better than the Honor 8X. The 8X seems to be doing some over-sharpening, and that leads to more noise as well as loss of fine detail. But it manages to get the color better, and the color of my t-shirt is spot on the 8X while it's a bit different on the Realme 2 Pro. Dynamic range is similar by default, but there's no HDR mode for the front camera on the 8X, and as a result you'll get better results in terms of dynamic range with the 2 Pro when it's turned on. Coming to the portrait mode, the Realme 2 Pro and 8X both perform pretty similarly, but the Realme 2 Pro images become softer than the selfies that it usually takes. These are the front camera images that are shared on social media, and most of you chose the 8X probably due to the better colors. Phone A on the left is the Realme 2 Pro and phone B on the right is the 8X. Here the 8X takes slightly more detailed photos, but the difference isn't too huge. In terms of edge detection, the 8X does well around my head but completely blurs out one of my ears. Realme 2 Pro seems better at a glance, but it actually misses out a lot more areas around my head, and the blur even bleeds onto both my ears, although it doesn't completely get it wrong. Neither device is fine-tuned for videos, but there still has to be one that's better than the other, and in this case is the Realme 2 Pro. The Realme 2 Pro allows capture of videos up to 4K resolution at 30fps and 1080p 30fps with EIS, while the Honor 8X allows up to 1080p only without EIS. Sure, the Honor 8X also allows a 18.7:9 mode and a 60fps mode, which is definitely something you may want, but I prefer to have a stable footage, and the Realme 2 Pro provides that. EIS is really needed on the 8X, and perhaps the brand will introduce it via software updates, but until then you may need to resort to using a tripod, gimbal or some other stabilizer. The front-facing camera video maxed out at 1080p on both the devices, but here the 8X bridges the gap a bit more and puts on a better performance, and both are pretty equal in terms of output. So this is the front-facing camera on the Honor 8X capturing 1080p video. It supports a maximum of 1080p resolution both with the front as well as rear cameras, but there's no EIS involved. But still, let me know what you guys think about the overall sharpness, the dynamic range, the stabilization without EIS, and how well it's capturing my voice as well. So this is the front-facing camera on the Realme 2 Pro capturing 1080p video. The rear camera does support 4K, but none of the cameras support EIS yet. But let me know what you guys think about the overall sharpness, the dynamic range, the stabilization without EIS, and even how well it's picking up my voice in this particular scenario. It's not tough to see the winner here. Apart from a few cases, the Realme 2 Pro does take the cake in terms of photo and video performance. Of course, neither smartphone is perfect, and depending on how important the camera is to you, one may be better than the other. But purely from a photography point of view, the Realme 2 Pro is what I'd get. Thanks for watching this video. See you again in the next one.